So that's probably enough library intro. Oh, I meant to do this earlier, but let me take down my screen share, and then I will say, Travis, I'll let you kind of tell people about yourself some, but he's done a lot of amazing projects. The documentary called the Miracle of Father Cape, is it pronounced Capon or Capone? Capon, right?
Capon or Capon, either one is right.
Yeah.
And just of importance, I'm actually in the process right now of essentially making a sequel to that documentary. And that story will revolve around the sort of detective story that has taken place to identify his remains and then bring him back to Kansas. And I will be going to Hawaii here in a month to come home with his remains. And I'm making a new documentary film about that. So perhaps we can discuss that down the road in the future on this program.
Yeah, that would be amazing. That's really cool. And then I think it's, how many years ago was it that you can go ahead and launch into your presentation if you like. Tell us about all things drone.
Well, so I've been a photographer at the Wichita Eagle for a really long time now, since 1997. In fact, I was actually a summer intern in 1995. And by the way, I apologize for I'm obviously in the comfy confines of my car on this 100-degree day, and I am on Main Street in Great Bend, and I'm here because I was doing some drone work. It's nothing that's going to win any awards, trust me, but I actually have the drone sitting right here on my dash. So here it is, my little Mavic 2 Pro. It's my favorite drone. There's about 3 different drones that I fly, but this is my number one go-to. So anyway, I'm in my car and I apologize for that, but I was out on the road and this, I just decided was gonna be the way I had to make it work. So having said that, I've been a photographer for a long time, since '97. I went to college at the University of Nebraska. I am not a native Kansan. I'm from Wyoming originally. So, and one of the things that was difficult for me as a photographer was that, when I was learning photography as a teenager, I had these amazing vistas and mountain ranges and hills and things to learn on. And I get out here and those things just simply don't exist. And it makes some shots a little more challenging. And I always, as a photographer, I was always like, man, I just wish I could pull like a scissor lift or a bucket lift behind my car. So I have that way to get up high. And now I have that way, and it's a drone. And it has like really been just the most incredible, useful tool. And, I'll show some pictures and I'll talk about some of the tricks and stuff. But, I think before I do that, and anytime I talk about drone photography, the thing that I can't stress enough is that there's just an enormous amount of safety things involved when you are operating a drone. And before I could ever fly for the Wichita Eagle, I had to complete my FAA Part 107 training. So I am a licensed, what they call a licensed remote pilot in command. And I'm actually due to take my recurrent test here, which you have to do every 2 years here pretty soon. So, when I'm flying, I'm flying for the purpose of capturing photos or video, but I have to remember every time that I'm flying, I'm a pilot first. And as the remote pilot in command, I am responsible for the safe operation of that drone. And there is an enormous amount of liability and risk if you are not careful. And, it doesn't take much of a YouTube search to find some real horror stories of of really dumb things that people have done with drones in an attempt to get flashy videos or pictures. So like when I go out on an assignment, the first thing I have to do is study the airspace that I'm in to make sure that I can legally fly in that area. And if I'm in what's called a restricted airspace, um, you know, I have to submit a waiver to the FAA to fly in that airspace. And now there's an automated way to do that and an app that'll help you do it quickly. Um, you know, but there are some places that are just off limits. You know, you anywhere in Southeast Wichita near McConnell Air Force Base, actually within a 5-mile radius of McConnell Air Force Base, just forget about it. And if you do fly there, you're flying in violation of FAA guidelines. And another thing to consider, because people are like, well, there's two sets of rules. There's hobby drone and commercial drone. And that's true, even though it's getting murkier. But if you take a photo, say you're a hobby drone pilot, and you take a photo and say you sell that, make a big print and sell that photo, well, you've just done commercial work. And if you don't have your Part 107, technically you're flying and operating that drone in violation of the 107 guidelines. So basically, if you're doing any kind of commercial work, if you're flying for like a real estate company, or if you're being paid in any way to fly your drone, you've got to have that 107 license, that FAA Part 107 license. And it's a difficult test. I will admit it covers a lot of aviation lingo that I never thought I would have to learn. But it was also very fascinating. And I learned a lot about a new thing and made me appreciate what fixed wing manned aircraft pilots go through. But safety is always number one. And thankfully, I have never crashed a drone. I'm very careful when I fly. One other not commonly understood rule with drone flight is that you have to maintain visual line of sight with your drone at all times. And sometimes that can be really hard, but that, you know, people ask me all the time, well, how far can your drone fly? Well, I don't know, because once I fly out of visual line of sight, I'm in violation of FAA law. 400 feet is your maximum altitude in a unrestricted airspace. It can be as low as 100 feet or 75 feet in certain restricted airspaces. So all these things you got to know, and you got to know how to work within the law to fly. And it's really not that hard. But you know, mostly I'm out over the prairie and places like that. And I don't have to worry about that stuff other than the 400 feet rule and the visual line of sight rule. So anyway, I don't know, by the way, how we're going to do questions on this, if they're going to come in via the chat or if people want to jump in or anything like that. I don't even know if we have anyone here with us or not, but.
Oh, yeah. We've got a pretty good crowd here. And yeah, for the questions, I should have covered this beforehand, but do you want to have a question time at the end, or do you want to feed you some questions during if people have them, or?
Yeah, let's do that. If people have questions, just shoot them to you, and then you can interrupt me because maybe they'll see something or have a question about a topic I'm on. So I do not mind being interrupted at all.
Yeah, so I'll just say real quick, those of you on Zoom, you can, there's two different things and they both work. You can either type your questions in the chat, or there's a Q&A button on the bar at the bottom and you can type your questions there. Those of you watching on Facebook, just type your questions in the comments and I'll see them there on my phone. So,
and what's our time limit?
We usually wrap up around 8, but whatever, it's flexible.
All right. Okay. So I have assembled a group of photos. So I'm going to do a share screen, and Sammy, you can tell me if it's working. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes, I can. Yep.
Okay, so I'm just going to kind of go through some of these photos. There's a lot of duplicates, for lack of a better term, of things that you might see that are similar. But before I get going through this, one thing that I think that is worth pointing out is, my use of a drone is primarily for the coverage of news. So like, apologize for the loud trucks and motorcycles going by. Anyway, I'm a news photographer. And so I'm trying to tell stories with pictures, cover the news with pictures. And sometimes a drone is a really effective way to do that. Um, and one thing that it has done is it has allowed me um, new ways to shoot things I've shot numerous times in the past. So let's see here. So like, for example, this was a big story in Wichita, this little boy who was missing for a
Uh,
long, long time. Are you there?
oh yeah, is there a way to make it full screen, Travis? Sorry.
Yeah, let me see. Can you see it now?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, so this was about a story on a missing boy in Wichita, missing for weeks and weeks and weeks. I use this because, people were seeing this billboard every day. It was accentuated just by the smoky skies in the summer from fires. Sorry, I'm getting text messages that I'm sure you can hear the dinging there. Anyway, so one of the things that I have enjoyed shooting the most with the drone, and is the prescribed fires that they do in the Flint Hills every year. And that was a subject that I had shot numerous times. And I would think to myself, man, if I could just do this from a helicopter or something, or if I could just get up high somehow. And as soon as I became a licensed drone pilot, I knew the first time they started burning when I had my license, I was going to go out and shoot the heck of it. And I go out every year and shoot the Flint Hills fire. So you're going to see a number of those images, and it just allows me to see this in a way that my mind always kind of imagined it, because I've seen a lot of photos. I mean, it's kind of a Kansas tradition in a way to, some kind of a Kansas annoyance to some people, but it's just simply part of the culture of our state that I think is pretty unique. Certainly being an out. How about now?
Yeah, that looks good.
Okay, all right. So, and then if I click on the images like this, you see the next one of the Orca Cowboys.
Yeah, the Orpheum and then the Cowboys.
Right. Okay. So there we go. So anyway, this is another thing I shot many times, a cattle drive, and I just just here in earlier this summer, and the morning light was hitting, it creates these shadows, and it like reminded me of these like National Geographic photos of camels I once saw back in Africa back in the day. That's pretty cool. And I never could have shot this any other way. So let me try moving to the next one. How about this one? You see the combine?
Uh-huh.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so sounds like we're rolling again here then. I wondered also if my phone might be getting a little bit hot. So I'm gonna try and cool my phone down because it's my hotspot. So anyway, yeah, just like with cattle drives and stuff, it's like I shot a gazillion wheat harvest pictures. And when I got the drone, that's another subject that I thought, man, a whole new a whole nother possibility of photos are there before me. And this was one, again, I just shot here this year. You know, a combine doesn't always, you know, make piles of chaff this perfect, but this guy was sure doing it. And, you know, that nice evening light again. And it was, here's the same thing. I was hoping for a little bit more sunset, but, you know, this was the one that nature gave me that night. I did see in the Q&A when I looked at that, there was a question from Tracy about figuring out which filters to use. And, you know, the answer to that is I don't use, you know, basically on a drone, the only filter that I would ever use is what's called a neutral density filter. And when I use that, it's almost only for video, so that I can shoot a slower shutter speed by putting like a darker front element on my lens without it being stopped down to like f/22 or something. But for still photos, I almost never use a filter. And I know that there are some drone pilots that use neutral, you know, variable neutral density filters all the time. But on these still photos that you're seeing, you're almost not going to see like any, you're not going to see almost any filter use at all. And then there was another question from Phil about the Part 107 testing. It's changed a little bit. And I will say that when I took it 4 years ago, I studied through it's a fantastic class, and it's called remotepilot101.com. I'll say that one more time in case you didn't get it. remotepilot101.com. And it is just a super, super, super great thing of classes. Now, it's not free, you got to subscribe, and I think it's like $150 or something. But what's changed since then, mostly when it comes to the 107 test, is that you used to have to go to an FAA testing center in Wichita. It's down at like Harry and Webb. And then you had to pay like $150 to take the test. So if you flunked, you were out $150. But now it's my understanding that for the drone test specifically, you can do it through the FAA's website, which kind of makes it like an open book test, to be honest. So I haven't done my recurrent with this new testing setup, but that's my understanding the way it works. So it's getting easier to get your Part 107. And then Tracy's question about how I got my job in news, it was just, I studied journalism in college and photography, and pursued it, you know, incredibly vigorously, and ended up here in Wichita, which I've been extremely grateful for. Okay, so here's some more news coverage. This is a big church fire in Andale. You know, and it was, I thought this whole church was just going to go up in a super thing of flames, but it didn't. But really, there was like no better way to cover this than with a drone. In fact, the fire captain came over to me, because at that time, fire was not operating drone. Now it's almost standard that any law enforcement fire is going to have a drone pilot on hand. But you know, this was a really tall structure, and you can see towards the back, there's a ladder up there, but he wanted a good look at their situation. So he just, and I was flying the bigger drone for this shot. This is my personal drone. It's called the Mavic, but at work I have one called the Inspire 2, which is a big, big drone. And when I fly that, I use an iPad as my screen as opposed to my iPhone. So the image is much bigger, but I flew down close, let him get a good look at what they were looking at, and we kind of helped each other. You know, I got some good fire photos, and he could see what they were looking at. Some more news coverage. This is a home that's obviously minus a roof from the Eureka tornado. I don't remember. I want to say 2018. Eureka's had a lot of tornadoes, so it's hard to keep them straight. Um, but this one I'm pretty sure is from 2018. And, I think back to like, man, what if we flew a helicopter over Greensburg in 2007. But now it's like, it would be a drone. But the other thing you got to keep in mind on these sort of situations is that um, when you have like a devastating natural disaster like this, you have to be incredibly mindful of the possibility of rescue aircraft in the area. And as a rule, like I just don't fly if there's like helicopter rescue stuff going on, because they're flying extremely low. They can't see your drone. So a lot of times, if it's like a hurricane area, the FAA will establish what's called a TFR. I think, yeah. So a temporary flight restriction, and you won't even be and once your software on your drone, it'll see that it'll know, okay, there's a TFR here, and it will not even let you get your drone off the ground. Another time that happens, oddly, is if you're in a news area, and I've covered a couple of hurricanes. The last one, Hurricane Florence in South Carolina, and you'll see some photos from that. But the president came to, survey the area, the flooding in South Carolina, and they put in a TFR. They do that anytime the president comes to a place. So like if the president came to Wichita just to like shake hands or visit a school, 10-mile TFR all around Wichita. Nobody's getting a drone off the ground. And so that's another time where, you got to be mindful of, and that's why it's good to know these FAA rules. Here's another shot from Eureka, where you can kind of see, get the idea of the tornado's path a little bit more. This one, I mean, this poor guy, look, if there's like two 50s era, early 60s Corvettes laying there, obviously this guy had like a super fancy garage. There's like a 60s Camaro and some modern sports car, and obviously his garage just got wasted. And another question people will have in this situation is like, who gives you the permission to fly over that person's house? And that is a good question. That is a great question. Because, when somebody said to me once when they saw this picture, and that's the inside of somebody's house. That's kind of like, isn't that invading their privacy a little bit? And that's a legitimate question. And one I got to ask myself in these situations. However, the rule is, the FAA is in charge of the airspace. So as a property owner, like if you are the property owner here and I say, like if I'm operating the drone from your property, you can say, please don't operate the drone from my property. If I'm on a public property though, I can operate the drone. Like another instance of that was we had some heavy rains and flooding a couple years ago, and I went to Fall River State Park, and it was anyway, Fall River State Park, and I flew the drone because they were doing a release of water, and this guy from the Army Corps of Engineers was like, you can't be here. And he was right, technically. I could not operate a drone from the Army Corps of Engineers property. However, I could fly that drone over that dam all I wanted because that airspace is controlled by the FAA, just as long as I'm not operating the drone from their property. So those are the kinds of rules that I've got to be aware of all the time. And I learn new ones all the time. So this is just a guy painting a giant chicken on top of a building in downtown Wichita, but much easier to photograph, in my opinion, doing it this way. Um, uh, it gives me a perspective that, I could be up there with him, but it's just a lot easier and probably a lot safer for me to do it this way. So we recently did a story on these splash pad parks in Wichita, because there had been this controversy about people getting sick at this splash pad at Tanganyika Wildlife Park, and how safe are these things. And this was one way to illustrate that, was to, like, here's the most popular one, downtown Central Riverside Park, but it allows me to get a cool perspective. I shot it from overhead, um, and that was another good way. A little hard to tell what's going on here, but so this wasn't our main picture, but like this, for example, this corn maze out by El Dorado decided to have someone cut a Chiefs logo for their maze. Um, and how else am I going to shoot this without a drone? I'm not. I mean, I can spend $600 and rent a helicopter and fly over and get some pictures and come back, but this is a lot easier. Funny story about this particular shoot. I took my daughter with me. She was about to turn 10, and I was shooting some video of her walking through this, and she got lost. And so I just had her. She had a phone with her. So I called her and I said, just follow the drone. I'm gonna fly right above you, and just follow it out. And I used the drone to guide her right out of this. So that was fun. So here's some coverage from a South Carolina hurricane. This is just outside of Myrtle Beach. You can see there's a rescue happening here. If you can see it, this elderly person's being helped out of her home. Really hard to fly in this area with all these trees. I mean, just really, really difficult. So it took it took a lot of care to get this done. So here's another great way to use a drone. This guy, he'd had his house flooded in a hurricane before. He knew the waters from this river were coming, so he started building this berm around his house to make his home into an island, essentially. And I don't know how it worked out in the end, but on the day I was there, you could see he's pumping out some water, but it was working. It was keeping his house dry. So you'll see a lot of downtown Wichita. You're going to see a lot of Keeper of the Plains statues, things like that. So this is a giant mural that was painted on an old grain elevator on the north side of Wichita. There's actually one of these happening right now in Salina. It looks fantastic. And I'm watching a photographer I know shoot it. This would be a neat picture from the ground, but it's a way, way neater picture from a drone, where you can just, get it eye level and get a much better sense of scale of how massive of a project it was. And I shot some really neat video on this one too, where you can, because the drone is moving, it gives you a whole nother sense of scale. Obviously, I'm just sharing still photos with you today, but video is probably about 50 to 75% of what I do with that drone is shooting video. So, as a student of photography in college, and I struggled with some of the general aspects of photography, just like anybody else. How do I make my pictures better? How do I make my pictures look like some of these famous photographers? They're just so good. And I had a mentor in college. He was a National Geographic photographer, and incidentally, he had worked at the Wichita Eagle before moving back to his native Nebraska when he went to work for National Geographic. And his name's Joel Sartori. He's famous now for this project he does called the Photo Arc, where he's trying to document with photography these animals that are near extinction before we lose them forever. So anyway, Joel taught me that a good photograph only needs three things: good composition, and what that means is that the photo is, more than anything else, clean and free of clutter. Clean and full of things that don't need to be there. And the second thing it needs is good light. So if you're out early in the morning or you're out early in the day or later in the day, that's usually a winning combination. I'm sitting in my car, and even though it's getting darker, I can see the lights getting cool outside. Or, windows, things like that make cool light. So good composition, good light, and if you can get it, some emotion. And maybe, and it's just like the Meatloaf song, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. And so I got 2 here. I got good light, I got good clean composition. And it's a pretty good, again, I've shot these boaters on the Ark River or the Little Ark River in Wichita a gazillion times. I used to live along this river and shoot it off my balcony all the time. But man, with a drone, it's so much cooler, I think. So I love to shoot it. This guy here, man, I've shot this thing. I could do a coffee table book on the Keeper of the Plains, and that's no joke. I've shot this thing every which way but Sunday. And so obviously once I got a drone, I was all about this shot. And I still feel like I don't have the right Keeper of the Plains drone shot. I'm still working on it, but a little foggy on this day. Fall colors are nice, but a little better morning light would have worked out. State Capitol in Topeka. This was one that required me to submit for an airspace waiver. It's not a hard one to get because it's like a Class D Delta airspace, which all you have to do is just put in your app and ask for it and tell them what time, what time you're going to fly, what your drone is. It'll, ask you a bunch of automated questions that you got to answer the right way. One place you can't fly is over any national park. Like a lot of people drive up to Tallgrass Prairie Preserve and think they're going to shoot some cool shots of the buffalo, but you're not even going to be able to get your drone off the ground there, because that's and one thing that you'll find that DJI, the maker of my drone, that their software will have is it's communicating with the FAA and their airspace rules. So for example, a correctional facility will have a geofence around it. So you're not going to fly your drone over El Dorado Correctional Facility and drop a cell phone into your hubby or something. It's not happening. And national parks are the same thing. It's going to be geofenced off, or you're going to get a TFR warning or something. So don't buy a drone and go think you're going to get a killer picture of the waterfall at Yellowstone. You're just not. You can apply for a waiver, I suppose. I know that there was some pretty cool drone work. If you've ever seen the Academy Award winning documentary film about the guy that climbed El Capitan or Half Dome without any ropes, free solo, there's some killer drone work in that. I'm sure they got an FAA waiver to do that. So let's see what else I got here. Here's a 3-picture panorama of some weather coming over downtown. Obviously, you're opening yourself up to all kinds of new risk if you fly your drone in weather. Wind is an issue. I've seen some pretty killer drone videos of tornadoes, and I don't know how they do it, but I don't know if I have the guts for that. So my house is right on this street. that goes down to Friends University. So I've shot the lights on Friends a number of times. Friends sits inside of the Eisenhower Airport Class C, as in Charlie, airspace. So I had to submit for an automated waiver to shoot this shot legally. Um, I have this video. I'm going to try to play a video, um, and we'll see if it works. Can you see it? Is it working? Okay. Yeah. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm doing this sequel to this documentary film about Father Emil Capon that I shot in 2009. And one of the things I did was I went to the land, the original Capon farm place outside of Pilsen to shoot footage of the annual wheat harvest, just to kind of give me some what we call B-roll of where Capon grew up. This is the same piece of land his family used to farm back in the 30s and 40s, and it's now owned by somebody else. But I went and shot some wheat harvest stuff. Used the big drone for this. As you can see, it boogies along pretty good. So you know, video is just a really thrilling thing to shoot on a drone. It's just a really neat way to see things. And so, you know, this is Marion County, Kansas, and in all its glory, as far as I'm concerned. You know, it's just doesn't get any better than that. So yeah. So I've shot, you know, obviously the church there in Pilsen. I've shot all over the place. It's obviously from a ground camera here, but this is my kid swimming at Lake of the Ozarks. I just shot this about 2 weeks ago. And here's my street again. Just right down by Friends Universities. Once everything's covered in white, things look pretty good. Pretty good. So, is there any more questions? I don't know if I see any. I think I'm kind of at the end of my thing of photos here. I'm glad we haven't had any more technical hiccups. At least I don't think we have.
Yeah, no, it seemed like that cleared up, and I'm really glad, because this is so cool to see your photos and to learn about this. We do have one here that Sue just asked, why not over national parks? Like, why is that just the decision that the Parks Department made?
I assume the decision would be, you know, I think that there are so many awesome things to photograph in national parks. Like, you know, let's take, for example, Mount Rushmore. I bet you could shoot 1,000 really cool drone shots of Mount Rushmore and have all these new perspectives of Mount Rushmore that we've never seen before. And heck, even I would love to do that. But what happens when somebody like flies their big Matrice six blade quadcopter right into George Washington's nose and knocks it off? Or when somebody has a battery fire, which, you know, one thing about these drones, you know, I talked about safety at the beginning, but, you know, when we think of battery technology today, we think of lithium ion batteries. That's what's in our phone. That's what's in new cars now. Drones use a battery called lithium polymer, and it pumps out a lot more power. Because think about what you're asking this drone to do. You're asking 4 blades to turn at 5,000 RPM at varying degrees of speed, you know, and to carry this weight and to take pictures and have a camera, and you're connected to as many as 18 GPS satellites at one time. So you're asking this drone to do a lot, and flight time is about 20 minutes on a single battery. But, you know, people buy aftermarket batteries, or they'll crash your drone and maybe they'll get it fixed, but they'll use that old battery, but some instability has been created inside, so you get battery fires. And if you search like drone battery fires on YouTube, you'll find a lot of really cool videos. So But what happens when somebody has a battery fire and the drone goes down in a national forest and sets the place on fire? And I could go on with examples. Uh, do you really want to go see Old Faithful and have 60 drones buzzing around in a circle while you're trying to enjoy that? No, no one wants that. So I think that's a great rule, that you should prohibit drones in national parks.
Yeah. We had a comment come in, a terrific program. Technical regulations are overwhelming. Not sure I could qualify even with maximum effort. So what would you say to people that maybe watch this and are interested in learning more, about this to see if it's something they might want to get into?
Well, I think that this is a perfect combination of two hobbies: aviation and photography or video. And aviation wasn't a hobby or an interest of mine, but it became one when I started to learn about this because I had to. And it was like all kinds of just really neat information. Um, like I always wondered, like, why do they call this runway 18? Why is the runway at, and it's because it's if you're coming in from that direction, it's 180 degrees south. So they use the 18. And there was just a ton of things like that, about why airplanes do what they do, why pilots are required to do what they do. You had to learn to read these things called METARs and NOTAMs. NOTAMs is an acronym for Notice to Airmen, which is a briefing that the FAA will put out about the conditions around a certain airport, visibility, uh, things like that. So, you know, a lot of that stuff doesn't apply to my everyday, just putting the drone up. Um, but it was interesting to learn. And it's just good to have a general knowledge of how other aircraft work for their safety more than yours. Like when I'm flying here in this neighborhood where this photo was shot, in my neighborhood of Delano and Wichita, I know that it is not uncommon for a helicopter flying, an Eagle Med helicopter, having dropped a patient off at St. Francis or Wesley, flying back to the airport, might go right over my house. Now, they're probably not going to drop below 500 feet, and I'm not legally allowed to go above 400 feet, but I try to keep a watch out for all other manned aircraft. And that's just one of the things that the FAA test taught me. So it sounds like it's overwhelming, but it's really not. And I think that if you are really interested in it, but you're worried about the regulations, well, then just make a point to try and fly in what we call unregulated airspace out in the country. Um, you know, if you want to fly over a lake or over the prairie, that's a good place. That's a good place to do it. I will also say that there is an app that I use on my phone called AirMap, AIRMAP. AirMap is the map that I use to submit those FAA waivers. But more importantly, I can just glance at AirMap and it will tell me what the airspace restrictions are anywhere I want, where I want to look. For example, I'm going to Hawaii in September, and small island, big military installation there, Honolulu airport, busy. I assume that, like, boy, I might not even be able to get a drone up on that island. And there's a cemetery that features big in this story I'm telling, called the Punch Bowl Cemetery, or the National Cemetery of the Pacific, where Father Capon has been buried since 1956. Well, I pulled up AirMap and I looked, and the Punch Bowl is outside of any restricted airspace, so I do not need to submit an FAA waiver to fly in that area. Now, as a point of courtesy, I'm not going to fly over the cemetery. I'm just going to fly around it, so that you can get this sense that it sits atop an extinct volcano and all this cool stuff. But yeah, so that's, you just got to know where it's legal to fly and where it's not. And, as a general rule, out in the country is always where there's no trees and no buildings and no power lines. It's a lot safer.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, Sue said Kansas is windy. What is the wind speed limit to fly?
The wind speed limit on a drone really depends on the drone that you're flying. So here I have the Mavic 2 Pro. Now my limit is about 20 miles an hour. Now, if I'm flying in 20-mile-an-hour wind, I'm probably going to get a warning in flight that says, hey, it's pretty windy. You better be careful. Now, the bigger drone, the Inspire 2, I might fly at a 30-mile-an-hour wind with that. However, the most common drones are these Mavic Airs, smaller than the one I just, and I would not fly those in winds more than 15. And you know, the problem with that, so the drones are incredibly high tech, and they're just these incredible tools where they're connected to all these GPS satellites. And if I take my hands off the controls, that drone is going to sit there. And if the wind tries to push it, it's going to fight to stay right back in that spot. But what happens is that taxes the battery. And you know, when one of these one story I will tell you was when I shot this picture. This fire was so big that the fire began to create its own wind. And I'm trying to get the drone back to me, and I can't. Like, I'm flying a small drone here, and I can't get it. It's just like pushing. You can see it's barely moving. Now I tried to drop low, because obviously the higher you go, the higher the wind is usually. So, you know, to get into a lighter wind, I went lower. Typically, I never fly my drone when the battery gets anywhere less than 20%. Like, if, you know, I've got a warning that starts flashing at me at like 25%, and I'll almost always bring it back. When I landed at this one, I had 3% battery left, and I was pretty close to losing my drone because it couldn't fight through the wind. And as it did, it was just sucking the battery down even faster. So as a rule, I try to like avoid windy days entirely if I can.
Yeah. Cool. That's pretty cool. And I guess that kind of that shot the video that you showed us when you're pulling back so quickly at kind of an upward angle.
Right.
Could you tell us about how do you do that with do you have joysticks that you push or?
Yeah, if I can find my controller here. I don't know if I can. So hold on, let me look here. I've got things spread out all over the car here. I'm not sure where it is right now, but there are two joysticks. And I will tell you that the joystick on the left controls two things. It controls the yaw, which is this, and it controls this, up and down. The joystick on the right is your pitch and roll. And by roll, that means this, and pitch is this. Because that's how, if you're going like this and you want to go forward, that drone is going to pitch forward to catch air to go. So when I'm flying with that, and it takes practice, and you really do have to practice with it. When I shot it where I'm pulling away from those combines, I'm going back with my right and up slowly with my left. So as I'm pitching back and going back, and then I'm elevating a little bit at the same time. So sometimes you have to think about it. What's really hard is to do the fixed circle around a fixed point where you fly around something and you stay pointed at it. Then you have to do a perfect combination of roll and yaw. Otherwise, you'll just roll away from it, but you got to adjust your yaw constantly to be turning with it. So there are automated functions in the drone controls, like you can set an automated circle of an object, and then once you get your drone up, you just point at that object, or you can point at a person, and it'll follow that person. But I tend to not use those. And the other thing is the drone has a bunch of Um, like this thing right here that I'm pointing at, that's an anti-collision sensor. Um, this is an anti-collision sensor right here. There's an anti-collision sensor in the back, and they're all over this drone. So if I'm flying towards something, um, and I'm about to hit a building, it'll sense that. But sometimes it's like not, if you're flying at full speed, that drone's probably not going to get stopped in time before you crash into whatever it is, your sensors. I mean, it'll pull back and everything, but I'd just rather decide, I'd rather be careful on my own.
Yeah, yeah, and that answered Tim's question that just came in about the circling. So that's interesting. Lisa had a question. Do you know anything about this? Types of drones that would be used in like search and rescue, maybe that could pick up people's heat signatures?
Yeah. So the sheriff's department in Sedgwick County has one. I'm sure Harvey County has one too. But um, the bigger drone, the biggest drone really that DJI makes is called the Matrice, and it has 6 blades as opposed to the traditional quadcopter, and it has 2 giant batteries. So we're talking about a ton of power. But what they can do, they can actually put 2 cameras on that. I mean, this thing carries some major weight, and one of them will be a thermal camera, and the other will be just a traditional camera. So yes, and those things cost thousands of dollars. But yes, law enforcement, fire, are almost all those departments are equipped with thermal cameras for drones now, and there are numerous stories out there about how those have saved lives.
Yeah. And I guess I don't want to get us started on a whole different program, but I thought this might on your website there's a section, the Faces of Guantanamo, and I know you've mentioned it as well on your Facebook page in recent days. Could you maybe tell us a bit about what that project was? And I think you've probably been reflecting on it some, given what's been happening in Afghanistan.
Yeah. So, and just FYI, my personal photo website is my first and last name.com. So travishine.com. And the Guantanamo Project was, I did the company that owns the Wichita Eagle did a big project in 2008. That's McClatchy. Before that, it was Knight Ridder. And they had a reporter in Washington that wanted to like get a sense of, man, we captured a whole bunch of guys and sent them to Guantanamo, like 750 guys. And we let a ton of them go because we didn't have a reason to hold them. So we went all over Afghanistan. I actually went to Albania. I went to Jordan. And we found a bunch of these former Guantanamo prisoners to find out what their experience was like and what the conditions were for their arrest initially. And what we found out was a lot in Afghanistan, it was a lot of like, maybe the American military would talk to a tribal warlord chief and he would be like, man, this would be a good way to get rid of my rival guy down the road. And he'd say, oh yeah, that guy down the road's working for the Taliban, which wouldn't be true. And we'd go snatch that guy and put him in Guantanamo and then find out, well, he didn't know anything, and then let him go. And then he just comes back to Afghanistan with the chip on his shoulder. So I went around Afghanistan for about a month in 2008 shooting portraits of these former Guantanamo prisoners. One of them, I don't know which guy in the sequence, he's got a beard, a black beard, and his shadow is cast upon the wall. And he was one of the founding members of the Taliban. They called him the King of Guantanamo because he was the only guy there that could speak English, Arabic, and both Afghan languages. And so he would, if there was a hunger strike, he would organize. But anyway, I tell people I had a founding member of the Taliban serve me tea and snacks at his home in Kabul. So it was quite an exciting time.
Wow, that's really something. And then I guess obviously the Americans being evacuated, it's wouldn't be possible today. Do you have any thoughts on on that, or perspective from having been in Afghanistan about what's going on now? Or
Only that I am not surprised. Like, it's just, as I said in my Facebook post, it's just kind of like a place that time forgot, you know. And um, it's a tricky place because it's like, it's not like, there's not really a sense of nationalism there. It's like your loyalty is to like whatever little, you know, it's almost like a county, for lack of a better term. You know, it's just like one group of people might feel strongly one way. uh, you know, they might not know anything about who's in charge. You know, there's a good chance that 50% of that country doesn't even know the Taliban's taken back over. Just a different place. So I don't know. It seems like, you know, every empire in history has tried to go through there, and the results are always the same. So I can't be surprised that this one's any different.
yeah. Well, thank you again for joining us. And I just think we're so lucky to have you in Wichita and the greater Wichita community doing journalism and photography. You do a lot of amazing stuff, and I would encourage everybody to check out Travis's website, the TravisHying.com, not Hang. I think I said it wrong.
All right, nobody gets it right on the first try. It's a weird one.
And yeah, and then there's also the Wichita Eagle website. You're always publishing stuff on there, so that's really cool as well. You'd be more than welcome to come to our potluck next month at the Harvey County East Lake. And just a reminder.
You said my wife is coming on next week, or?
Yes, she will be with us on Thursday, September 2nd, at 7 p.m. And we're really looking forward to that. I can't wait to have a chat with her. And if you want, you can be on the Zoom call as well if you'd like. And
well, just buy a book. It's a great book.
Yeah. And I think I know that they've been going like hotcakes, so I think she'll probably be able to tell us up-to-date info on where to get them. Or
right. Yes, yeah. Awesome. So okay, well, thanks for having me, everyone. It's been fun.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Travis, and thanks everyone for attending. Have a great rest of your evening, everybody.
See you everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.